Hello and welcome to YCFT. We're tackling some Stephen King again. This is our second big Stephen King project, as we followed on from our two-part It series last year, which was a lot of fun, and the first one especially was very successful. This time around we're looking at Salem's Lot, which I believe was the second novel he published.
It was, second ever novel after Carrie.
Yeah, obviously the novel was released in 1975, and we are looking at, this is going to be a three-part series based on the 1979 TV miniseries, the 1987 sequel movie, the 2004 miniseries, and the eventual part 4 is there is a movie due to be released at some point. At the time of filming this, the movie was supposed to come out in about 2 weeks. So by the time this comes out, it should have already come. Evil Dead basically took its spot. Got pushed back from last year. The acquisition of Warner Brothers, the change of their leadership.
Yeah.
We have the only proof we have that this movie's coming out is a new edition of the book has been announced that has a front cover that looks like something completely different. It looks like it could be the house.
Yeah.
We have no idea. There's no, like I say, no poster, no trailer, currently no release date. We weren't going to wait around for it.
No. We wanted to dive in as much as we could.
We wanted to get started. So for now, it's a 3-part series and we'll just do a sequel to it with the movie.
At some point.
This week we are looking at the original 1979 miniseries directed by Tobe Hooper.
Yeah.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Tobe Hooper.
Poltergeist. Obviously this was not too long after Texas Chainsaw.
No, so Texas Chainsaw was released in 74, 73 or 74. And obviously, this is 79. So I actually don't know if he did a project in between, but still very early on in his career.
Yeah. So a lot of directors were attached to some point. Even George Romero was attached at one point, which is crazy to think what that would be like. But apparently Stephen King said the problem they had was trying to find a script that worked because it's a pretty chunky book.
It's a hefty book.
Yeah. I mean, this is it down here as well. It is a hefty book. I have read the book or listened to the audiobook, which is about 16 hours. You're a good chunk into it.
I'm a good chunk through the paperback. Yeah, I'm maybe a quarter of a way through it.
A 3-hour trying to condense it down to a 3-hour miniseries, like 2 episodes, it's tough.
Tough, yeah.
And obviously Tobe Hooper was known for being able to make something scary, memorable, visceral, and on budget. It was filmed in California.
Yes.
Ferndale, did you say?
I think it was Ferndale.
Yeah, which kind of has that, like, the town, like,
small town.
Maine-y type town, you know, Stephen King stuff has to be set around Maine in some way.
Yeah, California, but New England vibes.
Yeah, and so Ferndale plays Jerusalem's Lot, which is the town abbreviated to Salem's Lot. Now, for the Marston House, the key Gothic house that oversees the town, they couldn't find something that looked the way they wanted to, but they did have a hill on the house.
Yes.
So what they did is they
had a hill on the house.
They had a hill on a house. Yes, they had a hill on a house. A house up on a hill. So they spent $100,000 created an exterior around this house and adding some floors to it to make it look like the Marston house.
Yeah.
Because it was in the right position, but they just couldn't find something that gave off the look they wanted. And spent a separate $80,000 on an external set of the interior. Yeah. Which is really cool. Like, I love that. And it does look really cool. And like when you see characters going through the town, you just see the house just constantly looming over them, which I'm going to say the 2004 one actually also does
I think
really well.
It does a really good job. 2004. In general, it does a good job.
Yeah. So, the premise. It revolves around a character called Ben Mears, played by...
David Soul.
I believe was your first note on this as David Soul is fit?
I underlined it just because he's a good-looking guy. I just really wanted to underscore that point. David Soul was a very doesn't look like how Ben Mears looks in the novel, but I think he was a great casting choice. He just has like that kind of natural charisma and like authoritative nature about him, and I always enjoy watching blonde-haired, blue-eyed David Soul in this.
Polar opposite to me. Ben Mears. He is an author. He has returned to his childhood town of Jerusalem's Lot to work on his new novel, which is based on the childhood trauma he had when he experienced something in the Marston house.
Yes.
Around the same time that Ben returns to the town, a mysterious pair of antiques dealers also arrive in town to set up a new business. One known as Draker, played by
James Mason,
who is glorious.
He's obviously a phenomenal actor, and I really, really like the casting choice for this. Again, very different to how he's described in the book, but great casting choice. And
his silent and unseen partner, Kurt Barlow. They are travelling. Essentially, like, they sell antiques, and they set up a little store
in Salem's Lot.
And the book the story really kind of gets going when a child goes missing.
Mm-hmm.
Not long after both Ben and the new arrivals
roll into town. Yeah.
And then strange things start to happen.
Yes.
There will be spoilers throughout.
Yes.
So, in case anyone didn't know, Salem Lot is about vampires.
It sure is. It definitely is.
Yes. Stephen King basically had the idea, because there was a lot of like great Dracula adaptations.
Yeah.
And he had the idea of what would happen if Dracula, I think he initially said if Dracula was in the modern day and arrived in New York, and I think his wife said, he'd get hit by a taxi cab straight away.
Instantly,
so he decided if he was going to write it, he needed to set it in a small town.
Yes.
He wanted to make vampires scary, because at the time he believed in them.
Yeah, so there's a really lovely... In this particular edition of the book I have, Stephen King's preface in it. So I think he was writing it back in the 2000s, so obviously looking back when he was writing the novel. And he says something like, look, I know that vampires today aren't necessarily scary, but at the time I wrote this book, I believed in vampires. So I think I can scare you with this novel. And I really, really like that. And also, yeah, with the whole New York thing, obviously that idea got kind of quashed very early on, courtesy of Tabitha, his wife.
Yeah.
But he said, well, what he ended up thinking about was having Dracula meet Peyton Place. And Peyton Place, from what I understand, was an American soap opera back in the 60s, probably also set in a small town. So essentially Salem's Lot is kind of like the result of that marriage, I guess, a vampiric kind of soap opera with all these, myriad of different characters, like small town gossip, everyone knows each other, everyone knows each other's business. And yeah, it's a small town besieged by vampires.
And it's great.
It's great. It really is. 79
miniseries, I adore. We've watched this twice now. We got the Blu-ray of it, and I adore it. I really like it's probably my favourite Stephen King book that I've read or listened to.
I'm really enjoying it.
Interesting. I got you the book as a gift, which was this front cover here.
It's this lovely yellow one here.
It arrived in a foreign language, though.
Yes, there is a slight error in that I can't understand a word of it.
Yeah.
Because I think it's in Portuguese.
In my defence, it said nothing on Amazon about it not being an English-speaking book, but we kept it because the front cover... Look at the cover.
Look at that, guys.
That's why Sam hasn't finished it. But she has really sunk her teeth into it.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
So let's talk about a couple of key differences with the book. I'm not going to spoil the book.
No.
Okay. Because... well, it's like 16 hours worth of reading / listening. Like, obviously they had to trim a lot. And Stephen King said that was the big problem they had trying to get a script together, is trying to condense this story down. And one of the main things they had to do was merge character story arcs together. Like, the woman who's having an affair, Bonnie, her storyline is tied in with the real estate agents whose stories are separate within the novel, but they brought them together here.
Yeah.
Just to try and include as much as they could.
Yes.
But still, try and keep the runtime.
Yes.
It's
one
of the pitfalls I would say. I say pitfalls. Like, it's the limitation of the series, or set in made in the 70s. It's just they can't show the scale. They cannot show the scale of the vampires spreading. So and this is one way they tried to get around that, is by merging story arcs together.
Yeah, which is understandable.
And certain characters like Susan Norton, who's the love interest, is kind of sidelined a little bit in this.
Okay.
But her father, who is quite a small part of the book, is actually quite big in this, and he takes on the role of the town's doctor. Previously in the book was a character called Jimmy, who was completely absent from this novel.
Yeah.
And they also downplay a lot of the religious elements. In obviously vampires, you've got to have some sort of religious element to it. But the character of Father Callahan, obviously the local priest, the alcoholic priest who's with shaken faith, is massive in the book and is basically a bit part in this. Now, I'll get to his scene in particular later on. But he, in the wider Stephen King world, went on to become a character in the Dark Tower series. So for such a big, character... Well, obviously he hadn't written the Dark Tower yet.
Not yet. No.
Obviously, so he went on to become quite a big character, and it was quite strange for me to see him as this little bit part.
Kind of like a throwaway scene. Yeah.
But also, in a battle against vampires, you'd think they'd include the
priest.
Religious things. Like, there's a hint. Something I always like in the novel is the crucifixes, like when they hold them up to vampires, they glow with like a godly glow. And we get a hint of that with some holy water.
Yeah, there's a bit in like the prologue and epilogue of some glowing goings on.
But the biggest change would be to Kurt Barlow, the master, the head vampire, the big bad.
The big bad, yeah.
This is what he looks like in the series.
Yeah.
Very Nosferatu-like. Even like having the front-facing fangs.
Yeah, very dead.
Very dead, like a mute.
Yeah.
He is not like that in the novel. He is much more, well, Stephen King said he's basically based off Dracula. He's articulate. He's
suave.
Suave. He's seductive. They made him mute.
Yeah.
And this sounds like I'm leading to a downside of the series. No, this is actually one of the strongest parts of the miniseries. And the reason they did this was because there'd been a lot of really good Dracula adaptations leading up to it. I think there'd been a very recent Dracula adaptation. And they didn't want to get compared to that too much.
No,
they didn't just want it to
sense.
look like another Dracula adaptation, so they changed
Makes sense.
Barlow. Stephen King was apprehensive about this until he saw it, and I think he really enjoys what they did with the character.
Yeah.
He actually only had less than 90 seconds worth of screen time.
Less than 90
It's
seconds.
like the Jaws effect, but he is memorable. He's the best part of the film.
Look at him. He dominates
dominates
all the
the
marketing.
poster.
Yeah, for sure.
And he's so famous.
Yeah.
Because of that look. But it wouldn't be a movie that does mean that Stray Cats take on a slightly different role as the Familiar. To be a mouthpiece for him.
Yeah. Has to do a lot of the coordinating.
But by
and
also having
scheming.
him not speak, it led to them being able to cut out a lot of sections from the book, which would have had Stray Cat speak. Not Stray Cat, Barlow speak.
Barlow speak, yeah.
He's fantastic. And he, made you shit yourself.
Twice.
In one particular scene.
Twice. Yeah. As I said, I've seen the miniseries twice now. And again, just to reiterate, I haven't read the book. But there's it's the first time that you see Barlow kind of in the flesh. And it happens so abruptly. There is no build up to it. There is nothing in the scene preceding it that lets you think this is going to be a jump scare. It's very casual, it's very informal, and then boom, like he just literally appears, and it gets me every time. It'll probably get me the third time and the fourth time I watch this as well. But his appearance is just so jarring, and it's just really, really well crafted as a jump scare, and like the first appearance of him. But yeah, I mean, less than 90 seconds of screen time, and he is just such a memorable figure.
Yeah, Reggie Nalder?
Nalder. Yeah, I don't think he was happy with his lack of screen time.
Yeah, he originally filmed a lot more scenes that were cut, but I think that was ultimately to give it that Jaws effect before Jaws?
Post Jaws.
Post Jaws, yeah.
Post Jaws. Only a few years, though.
Yeah, to try show less. And I know in the final confrontation, they have to keep reapplying his makeup because it kept coming off.
Yeah.
All over the newer editions of it, in the novel and everything.
Sure.
For someone whose look doesn't appear so this look appears in the novel where he doesn't look like that.
Yeah, I know.
And it makes me curious, with the new film, are they going to go down this approach, or are they going to have a bit more of a...
Well, so the new film, again, very little other than James Wan is producing it. I can't remember the director at the minute.
Yeah, I can't remember.
But they have said that this is going to be faithful to the book.
Yeah. But it makes me think, are they going to... So by faithful, that makes me think he's going to speak.
Yes.
But are they going to have it as a mixture of the two, I wonder?
Again, they say faithful. I guess what they mean is as faithful as they can be with a traditional movie running time.
Yeah.
With a novel that's 800 pages long.
Because this struggles to tell the entire story in 3 hours.
Yeah.
I've been thinking about this a lot, over all the incarnations that we've watched. I think you need 8 episodes and about 50 minutes each to be able to properly tell a story. And we're going to go into some favourite scenes in a little bit, but I want to talk about things that were influenced by this. And one of the biggest one was definitely, or most recent, would be Midnight Mass.
Midnight Mass, for sure.
Which, spoilers, Midnight Mass, that is about vampires.
It's also about vampires.
That is kind of the closest we come to telling this type of story spread over, that's spread over 6 episodes? I think something like that.
6 or 8 maybe, yeah. It's always an even number.
And it's a very similar story, and it's been cited as an inspiration for it.
Yeah.
So that is the closest we'll get to a proper...
Yeah, even the vampire in that, the main vampire, is
definitely
very Count Orlok, bat-like.
Yeah, this was the inspiration for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, especially The Master.
The Master, yeah.
But I think just the whole vampires besieging a town, you can just see the influences it's had in popular culture. And one of the biggest influences is Fright Night.
Our fave.
The whole final act, I realised when I was rewatching this after watching Fright Night, I was like, oh my god, this is
Yeah.
this is Salem's Lot.
It is. But even...
It's a condensed version of Salem's Lot. It's
talking about how Barlow was originally conceived to be, this very, like, suave, I don't, like, not necessarily seductive, but just, gentleman-like figure. Obviously, Jerry Dandridge in Fright Night is a very specific incarnation of that image of a vampire. The fact that Jerry has a familiar as well that is somewhat like in between human and undead himself, like, obviously can walk around in the day but takes on the role of a protector. Yeah, and there are so many similarities.
Yeah.
And again,
something that came only a couple of years after it as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they probably took advantage of that. This was on TV. It wasn't a movie. They could probably we can take things from this.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can see that even in vampire projects that come out today.
Yes, the influence is strong.
We're going to talk about some of our favourite moments, scenes, characters, just what we love about this incarnation. Like I said, it has its limitations. That's mainly like due to being on TV, budget, even just tech of the time. Like, it couldn't show the scale.
Yeah.
Another thing I realised it massively influenced, just thinking of vampires you originally thought about being in New York, the Strain TV series that Del Toro did. Because that is set in New York. That. And that does show, like, it literally like an infection going through the city. And that obviously must have been inspired by this. Obviously, any scene with Barlow is incredible.
It's a standout, for sure.
Is a standout. When he attacks the Petrie house.
Yeah.
When you first see him fully in the flesh, in, like, normal lighting, and he just towers over this family.
Yeah.
That's the scene that I said is extremely different, because that is meant to be the big battle of the faiths with Father Callahan.
Yeah.
And he's like, if you cast that crucifix aside, I'll let the boy go.
What do you want?
The master wants you. Throw away your cross, face the master, your faith against his faith. Could you do that? Is your faith enough?
And he doesn't. He's like, if you'd thrown that crucifix down, you most likely would have won this.
Yeah.
It's much more condensed down, so Straker has to be there to talk for Barlow. It's still a great scene.
It's a great kill as well, smashing Mark's parents' heads together, and Mark obviously is witness to this. It's just
Mark being
forever
essentially
traumatized.
The youngest member of the vampire killing crew.
Yeah. Yes. Young high school kid.
Yeah.
Basically.
The actor's okay.
I'm going to kill you.
I think he does a good job.
Yeah.
I think he does. I mean, there's a lot more to say for the 2004 version, which we will withhold until that specific video. But I think he's good. He does a good job with what he has. And, like, Mark is obviously a character that's, like, probably based somewhat off Stephen King as a kid, maybe, because in the miniseries anyway, I'm not sure if it's the same in the book, but in the miniseries, Mark is obsessed with horror. And his room is just decked out with all these posters from, like, the Universal era. He works on little horror figures. So he's a bit of an outcast. He's a bit of an oddball. His parents are a bit worried about him.
Yeah.
Can relate
it's the
to
same
that.
book. He loves his special effects, his monster comics, and going to the movies and making them all. So he knows about vampires. He knows his stuff. Also, they changed a couple of characters' names in this. Like, Matt Burke, the teacher, isn't called Matt in this incarnation. It's like, why?
Yeah.
We've seen this with a few adaptations before. It's like, why change?
Yeah. Yeah, it's called Jason. I think he's called Jason.
Yeah.
Lou Ayres plays him. Another
that's just a
classic
bit
actor.
Odd, I don't. In the scene with Mark, you said it was voted like in the top 100 scariest scenes of all time.
Yeah, it is.
With Danny Glick.
Yes, I think it's
Is it Danny or Ralphie?
It's Ralphie's the first time.
Yeah.
So the Glick brothers.
Like I said at the beginning, a child goes missing.
Child goes missing, the youngest brother, Ralphie.
One comes back as a vampire.
Yes. And kind of in keeping with the traditional vampire mythos, vampires have to be invited in. And Ralphie appears at his big brother Danny's window. Danny was with Ralphie at the time he was taken, but Danny was also, like, traumatized and potentially hypnotized as well because he can't quite remember what happened. Danny eventually also starts exhibiting signs of strange illnesses after this scene. And Danny's asleep one night, there's a knock on the window, and he sees his brother appear at the window, and oh my good God, the level of eeriness in this whole scene. I don't think there's any dialogue in the scene. And not that
like a let me in, almost like,
I think
Cliff, let me in.
Kathy. I I think there is when Danny starts knocking on the window, when Danny's eventually turned. But I think with Ralphie, it's just like... I
You just
don't
hear the
think
tap,
there
the
is
claws tapping.
the little tap. And he, it's this little kid and he appears in his pyjamas and comes in through the window. And
Well, you pointed out that he wasn't killed in his pyjamas.
no, there is a goof because, he was killed when he's out and about with Danny in his jeans and his little jacket. But for some reason, as a vampire, he appears in pyjamas. I honestly think that was just like a little continuity error. But the way that this scene is shot is so spooky. And the look of the makeup that they do, the vampire makeup on this little boy in pyjamas.
These massive fangs.
And it just, the movement of it is a little bit strange as well. It's just like a little bit peculiar. It's not natural. And then we realise, well, they did it on a crane.
They didn't want to use wires because W said that you can always tell when someone's on wires. So they essentially had a bit of a crane arm that would hold them up. But they filmed it in reverse because there's fog behind them and it kind of makes them look like it gives them that more floating look. And it's really eerie. So it makes you think that like when he goes to bite his brother, he must have started it there and then gone back. So when he comes down to bite him, it looks so off-putting. Yeah. And it is a really creepy scene, but it's extremely well done.
It's so well done. And it, rightly deserves a place in like the top 100 scares. I mean, I'm going by the Shudder. There's a documentary on Shudder where they talk about, the most memorable moments in horror. And I can't remember exactly where it's placed, but it's definitely there. It's talked about a lot. And it definitely deserves recognition because it is really eerie. There's also just something off-putting about how Danny, like, allows it to happen. Like, you just instantly become very submissive to the vampire. There's, like, hypnotized completely. Like, you are just totally helpless when you're in their wake.
Later on, when Danny then tries to get Mark is almost under that spell.
Yeah, but he resists it. He fights it with everything he has.
I love... What's the name of the character? He's sat in the chair.
Oh, that's Mike. That's the gravedigger. Yeah. Mike.
Yeah. Oh, man.
Oh, Mike. I love that character so much.
He always just looks so helpless. Like
he does. He's such like a really cool character.
Because they bury Danny, and he's, undead. So he hypnotizes a gravedigger to dig him up, and it's incredible. But after he's been bitten, Jason takes him back.
Yeah,
to his place. He's worried about him.
It's a small town. They all know each other. They want to look out for each other.
You see him in the middle of the night. He's just sat in the chair with these the eyes. That is, I think, what really sells it.
Just in the rocking chair. And
they do kind of look like that. It's like the way they reflect the light, and he's just sat in the chair.
Yeah.
And it's just there's an eeriness.
There's
realistically only like one jump scare, and that is the Barlow one.
Yeah.
The rest are just eerie.
You
just feel the tension.
I also just want to point out that actor Mike is played by a guy called Jeffrey Lewis, who is Juliette Lewis's daddy. He was also a very prolific character actor back in the day. I really like his character a lot. There's obviously Susan and Ben, which I really like their relationship in this. I like the pairing of them together. It kind of changes with every adaptation, and I'm getting glimpses of it in the novel so far, but I really like that. The showdown.
When we're talking about differences, in the I don't mean it's in the spoiler. The showdown doesn't take place in the Marston house in the novel.
Yes.
The Marston house is a big looming place where Barlow and Straker have moved into.
Yeah.
There's great lines like, does the house attract, like something like, does the evil house attract?
Yeah, that is something that I really like, actually. That it's kind of underplayed in the miniseries, but it is obviously a bigger part of the book.
Yeah, and even a bigger part of the 2004.
But there's questions as to whether a house can be inherently evil and whether it calls to a specific kind of person. And this is something Stephen King is clearly a fan of Shirley Jackson, who wrote The Haunting of Hill House, which is obviously recently adapted for Netflix not that long ago. But he also explores this kind of concept a lot more in detail in a mini-series he did in the 2000s called Rose Red, which it's not based on one of King's novels, but he came up with the idea of it, and he was really heavily involved in the making of it and the teleplay. And I really want you to watch this because again, I absolutely loved it. It doesn't get enough recognition, but it does go into a lot more detail about, is it, can a house be evil? Can it attract a specific, brand of evil to a person to live in it? And yeah, I really like that concept, and King is clearly very interested in it as well.
And the miniseries doesn't really go into depth with the why the house is evil.
Yeah.
Or even like Marston himself.
Yeah.
Children went missing, basically killed children. To narrow it down, and Ben had an experience as a child when he went in there where he had a vision of seeing him hanging from the ceiling long after he was meant to have been dead. It's always just stuck with him.
Yeah.
Well, in the miniseries, the finale, the showdown, takes place in the Marston house. This, I think it works. Again, very much like how it does in Fright Night. Obviously, it takes place elsewhere in the novel. If they consider how much they'd spent on the interior set, I think it made sense with this streamlining of the story to make it culminate there. And I think there's a great reference to Texas Chainsaw there. When they're going through the house, there's like a red wall with antlers and bones on it. I'm like, that is definitely a reference to Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, it's interesting because we've kind of flip-flopped a lot about, does Tobe Hooper have a signature kind of style? And admittedly, I've not seen a lot of Hooper's filmography. I've seen the first 2 Texas Chainsaw Massacres, Poltergeist, and I've seen this. And with the exception of that wall with the antlers on and a few bones scattered around, I really don't think that Hooper has like a signature... There's no like signature Hooperisms across his filmography that I've seen.
Poltergeist is very much, it feels like
it's more of a Spielberg thing. Yeah. And even, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1 to 2, like they might as well have been directed by 2 very different people as far as I'm concerned. Like there's no similarities.
We're going from a low budget film to TV, so there's always going to be...
And to horror to comedy.
Yeah. Obviously horror to this.
Yeah, sorry, I mean to Texas Chainsaws, yeah.
Yeah. But like going from Texas Chainsaw, like low budget movie to... obviously a TV horror adaptation, he's gonna be faced with limitations.
Sure.
But the final showdown is fantastic. They also change the fates of certain characters.
Yes.
Or just the fate, like say the fates of characters like Susan. Her fate is inevitably the same. It's when it kind of changes.
Yeah. Susan is destined to die.
All adaptations. Yeah. Susan is destined to become a vampire and die. Whereas in the novel, she is staked much earlier. She kind of survives till the very end, past Barlow.
Yeah.
And I actually really like how they do it in this one. But the final showdown, it's weirdly underplayed. But kind of like a lot of Stephen King's novels, they always joke that he struggles with endings. This kind of does just... The finale does the build up. Done.
End. And roll credits.
But it's almost like with Dracula as well. Like
it's the same thing.
It's very abrupt. You got to stake the vampire.
Yeah.
One thing I really like. I love how he like dissects and just falls apart.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
It is great. The rest of the vampires are still vampires.
Yeah. It's almost like, right, if we kill the big bad, then in theory everyone else should just return to normal. And that's not quite how it works in Salem's Lot. Killing Barlow doesn't kill all the other vampires. It doesn't return everyone to normality.
No.
And I do really like that moment in the miniseries where I think he's been staked at this point, Barlow. And then all the other vampires who are just like sleeping in this little basement, like in and around the coffin, they just start like waking up and they crawl. The yeah, it's just something really eerie about it. Like almost very kind of like animalistic, the way they just kind of crawl and just waiting for a moment to pounce.
It's like, then for Ben and Mark, the 2 survivors of this, their life's never going to be the same now. They are going to be
They are marked
hunted.
men. Yeah. Marked men.
And that's why I quite like the ending, which is set in Mexico. It's like they have clearly been chased for a long time.
Yeah, but literally out of the States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that was just a great ending. If a bit abrupt, like there's no like grand showdown with Barlow. They do what any normal person does. Like, right,
let's get the fuck out.
Let's get the fucker in the middle of the day when he can't do anything.
Yeah, exactly.
No one's going to choose to take on the big vampire at night unless you're Buffy.
Yeah.
For example, Buffy never takes down vampires in the day.
Buffy, no, of course, no, I know.
She doesn't need to.
She doesn't need to. She's
normal
Buffy.
People. We have to wait until the sun's up. But this is kind of like the same thing that they always go later in the day when it's like, oh, the sun's going to set soon. It's like, why didn't you start at like 9 a.m?
Yeah, set your alarm, guys. I know. One thing that does, it's not a pet peeve at all. It's just something that I question with every viewing of the miniseries is Straker. Because as much as I love the performance that James Mason gives, Like very kind of suave, and that seductive voice that he has. I really, really like it. I like the kind of like gentleman-like evilness that he has, always wears his suits and whatnot. But it's very ambiguous, like almost kind of frustratingly ambiguous to me as to
what he is.
Because he can walk around in the day. I don't think we ever see him eat or drink, but he can walk around in the day, like he conducts business. So he is, on the surface, he's human, but then in the showdown at the Marston house, he's taking bullets left, right, and centre.
Do you realize the mirror between the familiar scene in Fright Night when he's walking downstairs also getting shot?
Also getting shot, yeah, literally a parallel scene with the familiar, yeah. But in Fright Night, the familiar is shown to be supernatural.
Yeah.
To some extent. So I do wonder with Straker.
Stronger.
Yeah, he lifts up the doctor and like pushes him onto the antler wall and kills that guy. But it does make me wonder that, okay, well, what are you then? Are you human, or are you something kind of in between? Like, if you're familiar, do you get certain powers? And again, I don't know if that's kind of explored more in the book.
The way
I'm
it's
assuming
kind of
it is.
done in the book, again, it's because the characters don't really do great monologues. Like big monologues. A lot is left unanswered, and you're left to assume. But we do find out how a familiar is made, because this is a spoiler for the novel, because I want to go back to Father Callahan. Barlow decides, rather than killing him, he wants to basically corrupt him. So he forces him to drink his blood. That is how a familiar is made, by drinking the blood of the master.
Yeah, but not being bitten yourself.
But not being bitten. Bitten.
Bitten.
We know from that afterwards that he feels a yearning to obey the master. And Callahan can't, as he feels unclean.
Yeah.
He's always drinking, but he's like desperate trying to drink like the cheapest booze. He's got this taste in his mouth, and he just leaves town.
Yeah.
He knows, because he tries to go into the church and he's physically like repelled from the door. He cannot go in.
Tainted.
So he just leaves. He gets on a bus to New York as far away as he can. So he's like, if I'm as far away as I can,
GTFO.
I know I will come back when he calls. I need to get out of town. So if I am called back, I can't do any harm.
So it's the smartest thing he could have done.
Yeah, which I really like. And apparently in the Dark Tower, after the master is killed, he has the ability to sense other vampires, because he'd be freed then, but he's still like affected.
Yeah.
By it. So he clearly has some sort of free will, because he knows he doesn't want to do these things, but as soon as that instruction will come, he will jump to it. Yeah. So the difference is, Straker must have become a familiar of his own free will, because he revels in being
He really does. There's a
evil.
Wickedness to the guy.
And your average familiar usually has the promise of eventually becoming a vampire.
Yeah. I think the ease with which he sacrifices Ralphie Glick for Barlow, the fact that he doesn't even think twice about killing a little boy, says everything you need to know about this guy.
It hints at the fact there needs to be some sort of ritual for Barlow to be able to come, like the sacrificing of the innocent, the murder of a dog.
Yeah.
There's certain things that need to happen that's only really hinted at this, again, limited by its runtime.
Also, some think that, again, not to dwell too much on other adaptations, but I do think that a big limitation of this particular miniseries, and you talked about it at the beginning, is you don't really get a sense of the epidemic of vampirism growing in the town. Like, in the book, I imagine people are going to be dropping like flies. And in the 04 miniseries, it's done very well. But in this one, it's like, because we don't have such a bloated cast of characters, we don't necessarily get a sense of the scale of the damage and how quickly vampires are sweeping through and being created.
It feels like it's spread over a very small amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. Which
in a novel, it is spread over a portion of a decent chunk of time, but it's when things start to ramp up, they ramp up quickly.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a detriment, because I adore this adaptation, and I do think what we see is great. I always love watching it, but yeah, it's scale, it's budget, it's mini-series, it's a lot of different factors thrown in.
It's still worth a watch today.
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely isn't.
I love it.
So we picked up the Blu-ray pretty cheap, the new HMV slipcover. They put it out as a movie, so they just put the two episodes together. I think it really could have benefited from just a third episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you have any more notes on this one?
I don't think the only other scene that I did want to point out, it's not like a scary scene at all, but the meeting between Ben and Susan. It always makes me chuckle. a little bit. So Susan is in a park. She's having a nice little picnic. She's reading one of Ben's novels, and he sees this from afar. And so he goes over to her and he says hello, and they, hit it off and they go on a date and whatever. And it just always strikes me that is a scene, a guy approaching a woman alone in a park as she's just kind of minding her own business. It's done very well, and it's a very innocent scene, but it's just not a scene I don't think you would see today in a film.
No, I don't think so.
That's not also, how dating works
he's
these days.
She's reading one of his books.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a great opening moment.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And something else that's missing from the novel is a lot of people comment that they don't like his novels.
Yeah, I know. Like, it's questionable.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, her mother does not approve. But yeah, that just always kind of makes me chuckle. But yeah, I love the miniseries. As I say, I've seen it twice. I will happily watch this again. I can't wait to finish the book. And I think there is a reason that this one is considered like the definitive Salem's Lot adaptation.
Yeah.
Or, this one sticks in people's memories more than the sequel, more than the 2004 version.
Probably more than the future movie. Like I say, our main concerns of this is, can they tell this story in the average runtime of the movie? And I just don't think they're going to be able to. But I am hopeful, as you'll find out from our future videos. Yeah. There's a reason why there is hope.
It's the curse of Stephen King. The books are wonderful, but they're just too damn big to do justice. We can't
even the
ever
It
be truly
miniseries.
Faithful. It fell down in chapter 2.
It fell down in chapter 2, like between the two films. Also, the miniseries itself.
Yeah.
It's too short. They initially wanted to do like 6 episodes, but they just couldn't do it because
there's a catalogue of characters that are missed out in both those adaptations.
Today, with streaming, now is the perfect time to do a full series adaptation of one of his books.
People have the patience for it.
Yeah. So
Salem's Lot.
So that's Salem's
1979.
Lot. Join us next week for a return to Salem's Lot. Return to Salem's Lot.
Yeah.
The set dress is not going to change because for the life of me, I could not get a hold of this movie. But how well do they do a follow-up movie to this TV series, miniseries? We'll find out next week.
Next week.
Bye, guys.